Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting edition of Boyographic, show in which I, Matt, the Gameboy, will take you through the highs and lows of the Gameboy library, one cart at a time. This week it will be no different. It's Mr. Nutz. The history of video games is wrought with the graves of failed mascots. Some deserve their descent into utter obscurity, while a small handful did actually star in worthwhile titles. One such character? A squirrel with attitude. In 1991, Ocean's French division, imaginatively named Ocean France, closed its doors as developers and turned into the European marketing arm of the company. With this closure, its talent was scattered to the wind, but two of the studio's alumni, Philippe Desolé and Pierre Adam, decided to make their own game, with the Amiga being the intended platform. This would make sense, as Ocean France's primary output at the time had been solid Amiga ports of arcade classics like Liquid Kids and Snow Bros, both of which unfortunately were completed but never released officially. After pitching their idea to Ocean, it was agreed that the two would develop a game not for the Amiga, where piracy was rife, but for the home console market. In an astounding 18 months, the pair developed Mr. Nutz, with the only outside assistance coming from the game's composer, Raphael Gusquin, and the game was released in 1993 in Europe for the Super Nintendo. With the release's favourable reviews and sales success, an American and Japanese release followed in 1994, with Europe getting both a Mega Drive and Game Boy release that same year. Of course, we're here to talk about the handheld game, brought to you in glorious black and white. While the game's credits confirm Desolé and Adan had a little help with the port, it is no less impressive. The first thing that strikes you about this port of Mr. Nutz is just how great the game looks, with Nutz's sprite looking a little trimmer than his home console counterpart. The premise of the game is a simple one, though the storytelling is left up to the back of the box in the manual. An evil yeti called Mr. Blizzard is trying to turn the world into a block of ice. It's up to Mr. Nutz, a squirrel with so much attitude his name ends in a Z, to stop him through the usual means of pressing A to jump and B to fire his weapon of choice. Acorns! These acorns do have to be collected, however, so our hero will have to squirrel them away for when he needs to add range to his attacks. Fortunately, in typical platformer fare, Nutz can simply just jump on the heads of most enemies to dispatch them, with enemy sprites clearly communicating to you when this is a no-go. But hey, if you're out of acorns, Nutz can conveniently use his bushy bristle of a tail to whip enemies into permanent hibernation. Across the game's 6 worlds, both the enemies and environments differ pretty radically, which is nice to see in a platform of this ilk. Unfortunately, however, the great variety in visuals comes at the ever-increasing slog up a mountainous learning curve, too often found in Ocean-published titles. The game starts incredibly easy, with the player not really needing to break a sweat in the game's first area, Woody Land, or the fortunately non-phallic spider boss at the end of it. But from there, things start to take a turn for the challenging. See, I wouldn't be so down on this game if it presented its stages in worlds, as in how Super Mario Land 2 does it. But despite having a world map, each level is broken up into several sub-stages called journeys, with bosses at the end of them. Dying will see you either restart in the particular part of the level you're on, but if you lose all your lives, you're going to have to use one of your valuable limited continues, which will unfortunately put you back to the start of the level. This could prove to be a massive pain, however, completion of Mr. Nutz will not elude most gamers because yes, the game has a password system. So, with a little patience and some enemy placement memorization, you can take down even the toughest of stages and hit Mr. Blizzard where it hurts. Speaking of Mr. Blizzard, the game's 6 bosses are truly something to behold. While they're somewhat neutered both in terms of their difficulty and straight up bonkers nature of their mechanics on the console versions, once you stop gawking at how great their sprite work is and learn their attack patterns, none of them should really give you too much trouble. That is, of course, unless you've died too many times getting there in the first place. With a whole host of hidden areas to discover, and the completion rating at the end of each level, showing you the number of coins you managed to collect, it's also pretty fair to say that once you've cancelled the apocalypse, there is definitely reason to play the game again. That is, if the game's last stage didn't break your spirit too badly. The game handles incredibly well, looks great, and to my memory has no obvious tears or slowdown while I played through it. Mechanically, it also does some pretty impressive little gimmicks here and there, such as the game's second stage that takes you through a house in which you must solve some basic block puzzles to continue, swing from ropes to avoid pit traps, as well as swimming through the house's bathroom. These things aren't particularly groundbreaking, but to be honest, Mr. Nutz is at times a game that wears its influences on its sleeve, with sections that evoke Sonic and not too subtle nods to Mario titles here and there. But you know what? It doesn't actually detract from the experience. If anything, it makes a game filled with an eclectic mix of adorable and crazy sprites all the more charming. While I think it's fair to say that Mr. Nutz doesn't break any terribly new ground, which is perhaps some of the reason the character fell into obscurity in the first place, there is no denying that the Game Boy port, much like its home console counterpart, is an incredibly solid experience. I'd even go so far as to say it's probably one of the better platforming titles on a system full to the brim with subpar ports. The game did eventually see a release stateside on the Game Boy Color, where the game's then publisher, Infogrames, decided to ease things up a little bit. While I've played very little of this version, I hear it's worth tracking down. As for the other Game Boy outing of Mr. Nutz, the Game Boy Advance port of the original Super Nintendo game, well, in polite conversation, it's best not to discuss what's vastly considered to be a lazy port. People cry out for the return of Conkers, the other attitude-enhanced squirrel, but I say you should root for the return of Mr. Nutz. The character's creator, Philippe Desolé, actively draws him on Twitter, and while a Facebook page for the official Mr. Nutz 2 exists, there's unfortunately not a lot of information there. I'll keep my fingers crossed to see what the future holds for the franchise, but you should definitely use yours to play the excellent little platformer that is Mr. Nutz. And that brings us to the end of another Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, then please like and subscribe as usual, share the channel with other people you think may be interested, and watch some more of our videos. There's also a link to Philippe Desolé's Twitter and the official Facebook page of Mr. Nutz 2 in the description. Until next week though, Game Boys and Girls, it's goodbye from me. Game on.